And we didn't have anybody reach out to us for public comment.
I was just about to ask if anybody, so no public comment. Participate in round 2 interview with Mount Vernon. Margaret, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. So I, just so you know, this situation the last couple of weeks is not unheard of, but it is a little unusual. So as I said in my emails, we had scheduled the Mount Vernon and Jones Whitsett second interviews to be tonight back to back. And then a little over a week ago, Jones Whitsett sent a letter to the mayor formally withdrawing from the process and citing workload. So I'm just going to recap like what's happened, and then I'll stop and take questions. So we notified the MSBA. We had a call with the MSBA, I think it was Tuesday, and went through what they recommended for next steps. They emphasized in the conversation that they're not in charge of the process, but they did have some recommendations. And it was already very much in my mind that, you know, this is a competitive selection. And although I think you all had not expressed a huge amount of interest in having Flansburgh come back, I actually think now it's a more straightforward discussion in the sense we're really comparing 2 model schools. So we reached out to Flansburgh. They confirmed their willingness to return. Because of vacation schedules on the designer side, there was no way to have them come tonight. And I think really everybody needs a little processing time for this. So as we've left it, this committee will meet again on the 5th, which is the first Thursday after the holiday. And we will have these 2 back-to-back visits, presentations of the 2 model schools. And as I believe, hopefully you saw, but I can recap, I have asked both firms to get into more detail about cost and schedule. So if it's helpful, I can pull up and we can look at those questions again, but they have gone out to the designers and they are preparing their presentations. The other piece of this that came up at the last meeting was an interest in site visits. And I really want to thank Jamie Morrow, Mark Lubold, Whitney, and Rena Lorenzi, who we were able to find a time to go, for the 4 of them plus myself, to go and visit Mount Vernon's Goodnow School, which is the school that is the model for this, which is in Marlborough. And I guess that was Monday. This week's been a blur. And as part of this meeting, I thought we could actually get them to sort of talk a little bit about it, since we're now also going to have Flansburgh come on the 5th. I've pretty much got nailed down an opportunity for the same group. Thank you all for your flexibility to visit the West Bridgewater Junior Senior High School. That is the model that Flansburgh will be presenting. So when they came before, they sort of presented 2, but it's the West Bridgewater model that they think is the better one.
You didn't get any calls to go there.
Is that on January 4th?
Yes, so that's going to happen on January 4th in the morning.
Okay.
And then we'll have what I'm hoping, interview team, is perhaps you could send out later that day, or I could send out, if I sort of download from you, some information that we could share with everyone, sort of pictures and comments from your site visit, so that when the committee comes back together for the meeting on the 5th, we'll have a kind of similar level of knowledge about the 2 model schools that are proposed. So now I'm going to stop talking and see. I'm sure people have questions about all of this. So.
All right. So first, any questions before we dive into discussions around a field trip to see the Vernon Model School? Any questions on anything else that Margaret just shared with us in this update? No questions at all?
It's your audio. It was like a little
Oh,
faint,
You're,
so we
you're a
couldn't
little
hear
bit
you
far
well.
from the microphone.
sorry. Can you hear me now?
That's better, yeah.
So I was saying that before we dive into discussions around the field trip of Mount Vernon's model school, is there any questions for Margaret for anything else she reported in her update? Mark,
Thank you. So if we go through and we don't like the model schools, okay, what happens next?
good question.
That's a good question. So I would say that the committee someone would need to make a motion after the second visits, this meeting on the 5th. Someone would have to make a motion that neither model school was considered appropriate. And if that motion carried, we would go back to the MSBA, and I expect they would probably recommend starting a new procurement over.
Thank you, Margaret.
So, just as a reminder, when we did the previous project, we were interviewing architects without a design in place. And that was how we got to the Jones Whitsett was selected and then designed this building. So essentially what the committee would be saying is, yeah, you gave us a bunch. There's only, two came forward. Neither are a good fit. We need to start a new process.
Mark, you're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Ortiz,
Thank you. I think my question is following Mark. Our question is like, let's say that we don't like the model or the school model. Do we need to pay any extra money for a new, like new designs or anything?
Well, yes. So you would be what we were. You see the best way to explain this. So the way this process works, the schematic design period starts with the assumption that you have a site and program and you're hiring a designer to do a building. In this case, the MSBA brought in this idea of considering model schools. So yes, if you started again, it would be just like what we were doing with Jones Whitsett, in the sense you would be hiring them to do the project, but they would be starting at the beginning in terms of developing the design. We would use the site that's been identified. We would use the program that's been developed, but you would be starting kind of from scratch with a new design. Yes, if you went back through this process and picked a new designer, and the community would be responsible for the cost of the schematic design process.
Thank you.
thank you for the question. Mr. Yost?
Yeah, just to follow up on the last two questions, obviously it would be a higher cost, and what are we looking for a time frame? How much additional time roughly would this take?
Well, once the designer is on board for a project of this size, I would expect schematic design to take about 6 months.
So an additional 6 months. Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
I
Yost,
think it would be longer than that though, because we'd have to go through the procurement process and get the designer on. So I think you would be adding at 4 months for that. So
Yeah,
I would think it's almost a year.
I agree. I'm counting from when the designer's on board, but Erin's correct. It would take about 3 to 4 months to go through a new procurement process.
Okay.
So if you add the 6 to the 4, you're at 10 months.
Thank you. Linville.
Margaret, since we were talking about money, could you explain what the MSBA said about reimbursement if we did the model schools?
Yeah, so I, on behalf of the mayor and the superintendent, I did ask the MSBA. This correspondence happened just slightly before we heard from Jones Woodsets officially to confirm what had been previously discussed, which they did confirm, and that is that if the community chooses a model school, the MSBA will reimburse. It's a percentage, so it's sort of a little hard to calculate. What we don't know exactly what the fee is, but they would reimburse 4.75% of the fees for the project, and they did not exclude the schematic design process. So what the totality of the fees now, for context, in the core program, they reimburse a higher percentage, but the fees are also larger because you're doing the whole project from scratch.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. Oh, Miss Linville.
Erin?
I just want to say I misspoke and Jackie is able to be here tonight. She had tech difficulties and I think we just need to update her Zoom, but thank you for joining, Jackie.
Mrs. Machine, she made it. All right, now about our field trip. How did that go? Who went?
Jamie,
Jamie
Mark,
went,
Whitney,
Mark went,
and Rena.
Whitney, and Reina. So let's start with Reina. Can you share a little bit about what you observed? Maybe something you liked, maybe something you didn't like. How'd it go?
I don't know. It was a new school, so I liked seeing a new school. No, I mean, it was a beautiful school. It was nice to see it. Very bright and colorful. The rooms were spacious. The hallways were spacious. They had lockers. It was in an elementary school, so it was a K-5 school. So I liked it. So the design and everything was nice. I didn't, the gym was big, the cafeteria, and everything was nice. So I didn't see, anything major. But I feel like it could fit our site when I went to see it. So the teachers, we met with the principal there. The principal informed us of the process and what she went through. She got to pick, she was the one that did a lot of the design picking for furniture and colors of the schools. Yeah, it was nice to meet and get that tour, just to actually see what it looks besides the plans that they presented during their presentation. So I did like it. It was nice to see it live, and I think it could work. So that's what I can add to it for now.
It's a great update. Thank you so much, Reina. Mr. Lubel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add, we got the opportunity, if there were teachers walking the halls or if we ran into them in their classroom, to ask them about the school and how they felt about the space and everything. And I don't think we really had one bad report. One teacher maybe didn't like the paint on one of the hallways, but that's cosmetic stuff. And one thing that I thought was pretty impressive was, I think the school was designed for about 640 kids, and they've had an influx of Brazilians, and they have 850
Wow.
kids in that school right now.
No
And
kidding.
yeah, they had to move some things around and make the library into some classrooms for the time being. But with the breakout rooms and the space and the flexibility of the furniture, they were able to bring those extra students in and handle them. So I thought that was good. The school was definitely bright and comfortable. And, you know, I kind of imagine myself as a middle schooler. Would I like to learn there? I sure would. So, you know, and, you know, I know we've talked about the courtyard, but the teachers we spoke with, they really like the courtyard and they all use it in varying ways.
Mm.
And they felt it was really something that added on to their to learning. And I think it's, you know, it's part of their curriculum, I think, to use some outdoor learning spaces. And they fully utilize that. And I think the fifth grade, well, I think it was the fifth grade class there. Was it the fifth grade? I can't remember, but they're now graduating high school and they're going to be holding their senior prom back at the elementary school. That's how nice it is. That's how much they enjoyed it. That's how much of a, you know, a good time they had at that school. Between the space of the cafeteria and the way the doors open up into the, you know, gymnasium and then to the outdoors in the courtyard, they're going to use that whole area for their senior prom, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is cool.
And the principal, who at the time when she was hired, I think she called herself a principal without a school. So her job, she was hired as a principal to kind of work with the architects and manage kind of what was going on in the school and help pick out furniture and paint and everything, and had nothing but great things to say about the Mount Vernon group and how they were easy to work with. If any issues came up, you know, things got rectified, and you know, everything just went off great from her point of view. And it was clear, you know, because the architect was there and the project manager who would be working on our project was there as well. And she had a really good working relationship with the both of them. So, you know, my take was it was everything it was billed as, you know, when they came in and did their presentation. I was impressed then, and I was definitely more impressed after I went and did the visit. And as far as the ride was, you know, Whitney's an okay driver. You know, I think Jamie was the navigator, and she had us going all over. I mean, you know, the company was great on the ride down, and I think we all had a good time together. So that happened. So thank you.
Great update, Lubo. Thank you. Morrow, anything to add?
Yeah, it was. We said we had a great time. It was like good team building. It really made us feel good to go and look at the school and be able to report back for the group and speak for the whole committee. I think I was just really impressed with it. It was classic school design, but modern. It still looked like a school, but it was completely modern. The space was beautiful. The flexibility of the space, like Mark said, I think they had an influx of 200 kids this year, and there's just so much flexibility with the shifting. The rooms are spacious. They have I have a ton of pictures too. We'll wait to share until we see the other school and then kind of present pictures of both of them. But there's teacher conference rooms. They kind of said the breakout spaces at the end of the classrooms, they didn't use those as much, but like Mark said, we specifically asked about the courtyard. Their courtyard had turf in the middle, which was great, low maintenance. They said kids were out there laying on their stomachs reading books. It was just a really good feel. The way the cafeteria and the auditorium, the wall in between them opens up, and there's just a lot of flexibility in space. There's you know, we thought of different things that were important to this committee. The PT and the OT room was amazing. That actually got converted into a classroom now just because of the influx of kids. But it was amazing. It really, they're something that we talked about too, that we're gonna, as we get further in the design part, they use dehumidifiers. Like it's a air conditioning system, but with dehumidifiers. And maybe Whitney, you can talk about this a little bit more, but it's huge cost savings. And the principal said, going from zones that were air conditioning, like they would keep the special ed rooms air conditioned, but a lot of the other spaces not. And she said the temperature was just controlled. It was beautiful, and it was exciting to think that, you know, we could have a school just like that in Holyoke. So it was a great trip.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Great updates. And Whitney.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, we had a great trip down there. We almost got in an accident in Hoyoke, but other than that, we were doing great. Literally, this person ran a stop sign and nearly sideswiped us. So every blue vehicle throughout the rest of the trip we were leery of. But as they've said, traditional look from the outside, the inside, very functional. The courtyard, it opens up the building so you get sunlight in all different areas of the structure. Because if you stack it high, such as the Jones Whitsett, 4 stories, all the classrooms on the back side do not get the direct sun. On the inside of the courtyard, they even had to have special shades built over the outside of the windows in order to, because of the fact that they now had a southern exposure even on the inside of the building. So Jamie's elaborated in regards to the, and others have in regards to the cafetorium, which by itself is very gracious for cafeteria. The stage is within that. And then behind there is a special space for music that has another opportunity for the wall to be opened up and mini performances, if you will. Now, if you actually go back towards the back end of the cafeteria, there's another wall that separates the spacious gymnasium. And the principal of the school told us that they were able to have an assembly with all 800 kids once that wall was moved and the gym was combined with the cafeteria. So, all those different types of multi-purposing that were built into it, I found very beautiful, very functional. And when you walk through the building, it's a couple years old, there weren't any wear points. They had ceramic tile up the hallway walls to about 2/3 of the height. And it gives you a nice look, but it's very low maintenance and it holds up very durable. On the entry to the facility, there was a very secure airlock and vestibule, which separated visitors from being able to get into the building. And they directly dealt with the folks in the office. That whole area in the front, they spent a little more money. They had some beautiful ceramic tile on the floor and also some what they call ground face blocks. So it's a special type of a masonry block that just looks really nice. They mentioned they had different colors that they could use should we have different ideas as far as colors. It was very interesting, Josh, to hear the perspective of the 2 architectural representatives. One of them was the project manager for that particular project, and the other was the owner of the architectural firm, the principal, Frank Tedesco, and I believe that's his last name, isn't that Margaret?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so I had met him in person at Peck School and just had broken the ice there, heard the presentation during their Zoom interview previously, a month and a half ago, or however long it was, a month ago. But to hear him in person and to hear the rationale, that I think you would have found it fascinating, Josh, how he does the pre-bid for the demolition. Now, what that does is that actually separates that whole separate component and all of the complexities from the construction process. In other words, what he said was that they do a lot of work down in New York City in schools as well, and they always require a pre-bid for the demo, because if the general contractor has to incorporate that demo bid into their construction bid, then they also have to incorporate all of those subcontractors, plumbers, electricians, and so forth, into that bid as well. And so that's fine. But what happens now is the demolition takes 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, who never knows how long. And so all of those subcontractors have to forecast their costs into the future. So they bid high. They have to, because they don't know what the future will bring. So Frank says, when you separate the demo to the beginning of the project and you get that out of the way, and then when you're ready to start, your contractors are literally coming in immediately to lay the groundwork, and the anticipated costs that they have are very realistic and easy to forecast. The other thing was the school was built by a local construction company in the Pioneer Valley, Fontaine Brothers, who did a wonderful job. And they are have built numerous schools for the Mount Vernon group, the Chicopee schools and a variety of other ones. A Ludlow school that was just completed on Shaper Street in Ludlow. So very active relationship there with these folks. And literally the school came in 5 months early on construction and below budget. And that's about it from my perspective.
Thank you, Whitney. Great updates overall. I hear a lot of pluses. Were there any minuses or deltas that those that went might have observed that you think is worth sharing, or has it just been overwhelmingly positive?
Well, I'll let the committee members speak first, but I want to offer, not negatives, but just a couple of sort of comments on what we saw. Jamie, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say too, something that was unique about that school is they had a little dip too. They were about half as big as ours, but it went between 30 and 25 feet. And the school was beautiful, built along the dip. That was something that, you know, that's a issue we're dealing with. So it was cool to see the way the building was shaped to fit in that dip.
Mr. Calamar, I see your hand. Did you want to jump in before Margaret goes into her observation?
Yes, how many floors does this building consist of?
2.
2 floors.
2 floors. And how much outside space is there around the school for parking or in athletics and things like that?
So I'll pull up a picture, but
Connected to the high school as well.
Yeah, the entire school is surrounded by parking. It was a very, very limited site. So it's basically a building surrounded by parking with a little tiny paved parking area. I don't think it's comparable to what you would have because you have a much bigger site. But they had to basically put the building in the middle, put the parking around the outside.
Thank you.
And just to add, they did have their playground was the length of the building, fenced in outside. So it's fenced in, so the parking, you know, so to separate it from the parking lot. Sorry, I'm at a basketball practice. And they also had like a little basketball court too on the side, to the side. So they had space for the kids to play, but around parking lot.
You'll have a much more generous outside play area. Can everyone see this? This is just from Google Earth. So literally the boundary of the land, it was built in a wetland. To Jamie's point, they had to basically come in and fill the wetland and level the site. And what the city, I'm not sure if it's what they owned or what they were able to build on because of wetlands requirements, it's literally built out to the edge. So you can see, they put the building in the middle, the parking wraps around. You can see outdoor play space along the back of the building here that is kind of hard surfaced, fenced. And then there's a little baseball area over here that's also paved. So I think this site is much more generous in terms of what it offers for outdoor space, particularly the adjacency of Crozier Field.
Can you leave that up for a minute, please?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Mark, or whoever, Josh, you'd like to call on.
Well, I know Margaret was going to share some observations, but it looks like Mark has a question.
No, I didn't have a question. You had the question about, was there something that maybe we didn't like?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that I didn't like was on the second floor above the entrance, there was kind of some dead space there. But the architect had informed me that the same building that they have in Athol, they actually have a room in that area for, I'm not really sure what it was for. So there was flexibility for that to be taken care of and added space, for teaching or breakout rooms or other things. But if I had a nitpick on something, it might have been just that kind of dead area, but there's a solution for that, which was good to hear.
Yeah, my guess is that they didn't have a programmed use that was reimbursable by the MSBA. So they decided to leave it like that. It is interesting because it is some space that they could actually put a floor in and build it out in the future. But if it was programmed in such a way that that was a reimbursable space, you could definitely, I think you would definitely use it for that, because it was at the front of the building and had, quite was a sort of a very central point of the building.
Josh, if I could.
Yes.
So looking at this picture here, I want to draw your attention to the black panels. Those are solar panels on the top of the roof there. And we asked the architect after they mentioned that they had them on the roof that, well, how does that work? And what type of a payback do you get on them? And he says, well, right now it's approximately 15 to 20% of all the electricity that's used in the facility. So, and Mark and I were talking with the others on the way home about this, and Frank, the principal, the owner of the Mount Vernon group, he said that this was accomplished through a power purchase agreement.
Yeah.
And so consequently, they design all of the connectivity and where to hook up the wires and so forth, should you desire to do that. But the agreement comes through third-party organizations that take your available space, install panels of which they purchase, and then pay you back for that privilege that they obtain through credits and so forth to their benefit. So it seems like a win-win, and perhaps some, should this whole notion be able to get traction and move forward, that we could involve, you could perhaps have some negotiations with the G&E to find out exactly what those steps might entail, because it seemed to be a very worthwhile addition.
Yeah, I would say one of the advantages of having this kind of bigger footprint, 2-story rather than 4-story building, is that there is going to be a lot more roof. And this kind of solar installation is typical. I mean, there's no one designing schools at this point in the MSBA portfolio who wouldn't sort of similarly design the roof to be solar ready. And then, yes, it's common. The common arrangement is a PPA, but some districts are starting to take on the ownership of theirs. It's just you have to sort of do the pros and cons of that.
So, Margaret, did you want to share with us the points you were going to make of what you observed?
Well, I wanted to just reach back to what Jamie mentioned, which I thought one of the really interesting things about the building, and really, honestly, one of the things that would make the design that they're proposing very cost effective, is that they had made a decision early on that they weren't going to air condition the entire building. They were going to air condition the areas that are heavily used in the summer, which is typically the admin area, some number of classrooms, the library, and sometimes the gym. And then the rest of the building was on a dehumidification system. In addition to the work I do on district schools, I actually have worked on a lot of charter schools. And I will say pretty much every charter school takes this approach. So it's not full on air conditioning, but the cost of the full on air conditioning, and we'll look at it, I think, fairly early on in this process, is an important cost savings point for the city, as well as an operational cost savings. What was sort of piled onto that was they were using a system for air distribution that really took advantage of that. So it was an air system called displacement ventilation, where there are vertical ducts, big vertical ducts that are perforated, that ran, up and down through the spaces. They were discrete. They were in the kind of the corners of the room, and they were delivering air, cool air, or dehumidified air, depending on where you were, sort of low to the ground, and that's the displacement part. So you put the cold air in lower, and it sort of pushes the warmer air up, and that's how you create the cycle in the room. So this starts to get very nudgy, but I actually, one of the things that also means is that you don't have a lot of you don't need a lot of horizontal space for duct work, which allows you to have lower floor to floor heights, which allows you to have a smaller volume for the building. And it's easy to forget in this process that the biggest control point you have for the building is building only the square footage you need and building it in a volume that's as small as reasonably possible. So, you know, big floor to floor heights can be great. I thought one of the things they had done really well is they had managed the floor. They had in a building where they had kept the floor to floor height pretty tight. It actually felt, you know, it didn't feel like you were in a low ceilinged building because of the way they'd managed it.
Erin?
That sounds really interesting. I do want people to know that Holyoke Public Schools offers a lot of summer programming, and presumably the new middle school would be the best place for middle school summer programming. So that we'll just need to look into that. Like, I just wanted people to know we do use our best buildings year round.
Well, and you know, on that basis, the previous design had assumed 100% air conditioning. We had assumed that as becoming the newest building in the portfolio, it would be completely full in the summer. What was interesting in Marlborough was that the principal said that this school is the same. The Goodnow School is their newest school. They're using the whole building in the summer, and they have been comfortable with the dehumidification. So this is not the last time we'll talk about it. I just wanted to plant a seed for you all to think about.
Good point. Thank you, Margaret. Any other questions, comments, concerns for Margaret or any of the members that went on this trip to see this model school? Erin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that Raina and I were able to make reference calls, and those are linked. They were linked in the agenda, and Whitney still will make one, and then we'll do them for Flansburgh as well. But overall, I talked to somebody who was on the school building committee and the weekly construction committee in Athol, which sounds like uses the same design, and had very, very positive things to say, both about Mount Vernon Group and Fontaine Brothers, who did the build too. And I encourage people to read those notes. Raina, did you want to summarize your talk?
Can I just say one thing about that before you speak? So I think one of the more interesting parts about this is that Fontaine built Athol, built Goodnow, and presumably in the Chapter 149 bidding situation would have they really understand the cost of building this building, or a variation of it. So, you know, it suggests that they would be interested in bidding on it, and that we would be glad to have them. So
go ahead, Raina.
So I spoke to the business administrator at the Marlborough public school system, because the superintendent actually left, the one that was spearheading this project. So he informed me he came in during groundbreaking, and he just had positive things to say about Mount Vernon. And also he put a plug in for the model school, because he said that this is the 4th time they built this model school. It was efficient to build it because the builders, there was the 2nd or 3rd time they built it themselves. So that's why they were probably able to come under budget and before 5 months earlier.
Interesting.
So he just said that they're going out to bid for another school, and he wishes he could just take that design and just go ahead with it. Like, he would do it all over again, same design, same design company. He said that he was impressed that, you know, Frank came out to the site more often to check in, And as an owner of a company, he doesn't see that most often. That's why they have project managers. So he was impressed with that. And he just had very positive things to say. So, and he just says to go with it because it's the best thing to do with model schools because it's already been, to be efficient and fast and on time. There was nothing to work out. They had small little redesigns with park and the color schemes and whatnot, but he said that it didn't delay the project at all. So he was very happy. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Raina. Any questions for Margaret, Raina? Go ahead, Margaret.
So just one other comment to make about what Whitney was describing and what you might remember Frank Tedesco talking about in the interview. I do agree with the point that Frank made in the interview and on the site visit, that it's very efficient and cost effective to do the demolition, to bid the demolition first, and then to bid and build the school. It is definitely the most cost-effective way to do it for all the reasons that Whitney recited. The only caveat I would make is that when you do that, and this is just to think about again, you're essentially signing a contract to demolish the building before you have bid the building. So you have a detailed estimate of what you think it's going to bid at, but you don't have that bid in hand. So there is some risk associated with it. Frank made very clear in our conversation he thinks it's a risk worth taking, but it comes down to how you are going to fund the project and how you are going to get signed off to fund the project.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Any other members? Comments, questions? Looking at the item here, we're not ranking anybody since we haven't interviewed anybody, so we're just going to skip that.
Well, the thing I would just like to say is what I hope we will be able to do on January 5th after this these two further presentations is to follow the model the MSBA does when they do designer selection, which is there's a discussion and then every person goes around the room. Everybody ranks at the same time, their first and second, and we go around, we collect all the numbers, and it's that summary calculation that determines the rank of 1 and 2. Based on that ranking, then we would negotiate with the top ranked firm.
Okay. Everybody understand that, what Margaret just said? Go ahead, Lubold.
Yeah, I just, this process kind of drags on, and it kind of drives me crazy. But, in the big picture of things, we're looking at $200,000 to $250,000 a month. Okay, yeah. When you start looking, the more delays that happen. Okay, I'm hoping that our next meeting that we could actually take a vote after we interview the firms and have a discussion, no matter how long it takes us that evening, to just get this thing moving. That's my personal opinion on things. And now I think Jones Whitsitt out of it. I just feel that we can hopefully do that at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mark. I agree with you. Linville?
I'm just wondering what time we will be starting when are we going to be starting at 5 or 6? Just kind of expecting that this is probably going to be a 3-hour meeting because I need to know for public notice and interpretation.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think if people are willing, remembering how late we ran last time, I do think it would be great to start before 6, but there are a lot of schedules involved, so that's my suggestion, not a requirement.
I guess we can settle that.
Jackie sorry.
The next meeting's on January 5th. Are there any objections for a start time of 5 o'clock? Just throwing it out there.
Not objection.
No objections? No one has a conflict, maybe getting out of work, trying to get home on time, type of conflict at all?
Jackie does have a conflict and
Perfect.
the,
All right,
the
so
attendant
how
might,
about
unfortunately, I didn't realize this.
5:30?
Well, they have conflicts all evening because they're treating the principals to like a celebration dinner. I didn't realize that till today, so I was
What time
kind of
does that
wondering.
start, Jackie?
We're meeting at the Delaney House at 5, and we're thinking it's 5 to 8.
And how fast
So-
can you eat?
Sounds like
You do a
Jackie
Zoom
January
while
5th,
you
you're
eat.
out.
I know. I'm really sorry, but this had been rescheduled one other time, and so. And I don't know if anybody on the call has a conflict, but it is a long weekend because we have no school on Friday because of Three Kings. So I don't know if that date works for everybody.
Should we consider the day prior, maybe Wednesday, January 4th?
I can't do a Wednesday, but we had talked before about a Tuesday. So I don't know, what about Tuesday,
Erin, were the interviews already scheduled though with those two for January
Well,
5th?
They have confirmed that they are available that date, but I told them I needed to consult the committee. The one thing I'll say is that since the site visit to the school can't happen till the 4th, if it can't be that day, I would suggest that we go to the following week of the 9th.
So if we're changing just so that folks know that if we're not doing it on January 5th, it's because we want to accommodate 100% participation, so it includes Jackie. If folks don't care if whether or not Jackie participates,
Totally.
we can stay with the
Totally up
5th.
to you guys.
If we do care, and I care, it sounds like Margaret, you're considered. And to Lubold's point, we want to get rocking and rolling, so we don't want to extend too long. But the following Thursday, right? Is that what you said, Margaret?
Well, or Tuesday or Thursday.
Tuesday.
I would just bump it into the next week because of it's conflicting with the holiday and things that are already in place.
So that's January 10th, right?
The 10th or the 12th, as Erin said.
January 10, 5 o'clock.
Well, is
objections?
there a city council meeting that night, Peter?
No.
The first, I think there's an ordinance committee meeting that night. It's the first council meeting will be the first Tuesday.
Oh, that's
So it'll be, I think the second. The third will be our council meeting.
There's a public safety committee meeting that night. Nobody here is on public safety, right?
No.
And my son has CYO basketball practice that night. Looks like I'll be missing that.
You could
How
do
about
it
the
from
12th? Is the 12th a bad night since we've been doing on Thursdays? Is the 12th a bad night for anybody?
The 10th is good. I mean, was there any objections to the 10th?
I can't do the 10th. I can't do Tuesdays.
Got it. All right. So the next day was the 12th.
12th, yeah.
Good.
That sounds good.
I mean, I will say that the advantage of doing that is that we could meet on the 5th, and the folks who are visiting the West Bridgewater School could make a report like they did tonight, which would mean that when we came to the interviews, that all of that was behind us. So we're going to have a short meeting on the 5th to hear the report, and then just do the interviews and the voting on the 12th.
That seems fair, and we could do reference calls on the 5th then too.
Yeah.
People could summarize.
Now I'll have to go back and confirm with everybody, but like everything, the further out you get, many of these folks were taking off, basically from Monday until the new year. So I think they'll be back changing their desks by the first couple of weeks of January.
Okay. So we're running with the 12th, 5 o'clock, 100% participation. We'll be there interviewing the two designers, and we're
Mount
also going to
Vernon
be,
Group and Flansburgh.
if nothing gets in our way, we'll be taking a formal vote on our decision on which we want to proceed with. Leading up to that, references are going to be checked. People are going to read the notes on that. I think things are in order.
And I encourage people to go back now that we've been through all this and look back, if you have time, at the applications that were made, because I think you'll find they're more meaningful now that we've had so much discussion. So I've actually just been pulling up and looking at what they submitted, and there's more now that we've discussed it. I think some of the things that they presented in their design presentation, I think will have more meaning. Here is just an example of, I think, one of the important pages. So this is a page from Mount Vernon Group's application that started to talk about how they would program this version, this building for a middle school. And Flansburgh did the same. I would just encourage you to look at what they did with the West Bridgewater School, which is the one they're proposing. So there's some Christmas homework. How's that?
Josh, I have a question.
Go ahead, Whitney.
I don't want to really, just building off of what Marcus said here, and I know Jessica has nodded her head. Sooner or later, we saw a schedule projection from Mount Vernon Group that indicated that they could actually complete this building by August of 2025, a year ahead of the other two design teams. Now, that included time of which would have been allocated to that process during December, which is what we're currently in. Now, sooner or later, Mount Vernon Group has to have a break-even point where they can no longer offer that opportunity. And we are making decisions now, which again, from where we thought we would be interviewing tonight. I think we really need to ask Mount Vernon Group what's their break-even here on being able to deliver that date. And if we get into the middle of January, having lost December, can they still bring that forward? And and I think we can ask them that tomorrow. So if they can't, then can they still do it now? Can they still salvage it shortly after the new year? Because apparently that's the only time we can bring this forward. So, and if we get into literally the middle of January, again, I want them to know that we're passionately looking to make an intelligent decision here, but that's a $3 million savings. And I think we really would be short-sighted if we did not inquire ahead of time regarding the scheduling of our meeting.
Margaret, I'm calling on you.
Whitney, what we've asked them to do, if you look back to the questions I sent, they've presented it's hard for me to find the right verb, the right adjective. But I'm going to say very aggressive schedule, which ignores funding requirements. That's what was presented. It was assuming that they would be able to move to other stages of the project without confirmation from the city that the funding is in place or from the MSBA. Now, they've indicated that they may be willing to do that at risk. That's really the question here. The question is not whether we take 2 extra weeks to settle this. The question is whether, knowing that there are, and making sure that you understand that there are milestones for funding commitment, what we really need them to do is come back and say, are they willing to do that? That's what was implied in the interview. So I don't think the 2 weeks is the issue. The issue is that if the city doesn't have funding in place till, the city hasn't voted their share of the funding till, let's say, May, right? Are they planning to go ahead and start the detailed design before that? That's where the time savings is. It's not this little window right now, because they're all going away on holiday. I mean, everybody's on vacation in both of these offices for the next 10 days.
Go ahead, Mark.
Margaret, I know, what is it, about 4 months as part of that timeline of the MSBA to approve like the design or the schematic design? Is that part, was that, I just don't have it in front of me.
I'm gonna pull it up and we can look at it.
The only reason I'm curious on that is because it is a model school and it's been done 3 times already. Is there any leeway on the MSBA's side to be able to expedite? No?
No, so you make a submission. It's very structured. It's not unique to model school or not model school. You make a submission and approximately 6 weeks later they vote.
Okay.
The board is not going to take a vote just for Holyoke. And it has to do with the review process and the vetting they go through of the submittal, as well as the availability of the board members. I would not want to be the person that has to schedule these board meetings, to be completely honest. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up this schedule thing just as a reminder. Just give me a minute to find the right page. Okay. Can everybody see that? So this is that image that I shared on the first, and I can try to make it a little larger because just overall, the point that Whitney's making, which is an important one, is that there are 3 schedules on the table: my schedule, Flansburgh's schedule, and Jones Witzett's schedule. All made very conservative assumptions about the overall timeline, right? The one that was different was Mount Vernon groups. And if you'll remember these dotted lines, these are submission dates for board votes. So the very next submission date, the very first date on which we could submit would be March 2nd to the MSBA, and then there would be an April 26th board vote. Now, typically, let's say we were going for that date, in order for the designer to be authorized to proceed, the city would have to authorize their share of the funding before that started. In this schedule, which did not reflect, it reflected the submission, but not the funding approval. They are starting, and this is where I'm going to blow this up a little bit. What they said in the meeting that they presented was that here's the submission, right? The board vote doesn't happen till here. And I'm guessing your local funding approval wouldn't happen to here. They are starting construction documents before either the MSBA or the city has voted their funding agreement. Now, if they're willing to do that at risk, no problem. But you'll notice that the other schedules assumed that process would take longer. So I think that's really the question. This holiday period is a period where very little work gets done in architectural offices, because most people, I'm guessing this is true for you all, have vacation that they have to take before the end of the year. So, the world of designers and consultants kind of empties out. So I know it's frustrating because it's been taking a long time to get here, but that to me is the core issue, are they willing to proceed at risk? And I would never ask that of someone, but essentially that's what they're implying with their schedule.
Mark, you're good?
Yes, thanks.
Any other questions here?
Yeah, I have a question for Margaret. Margaret, what are the instances where the mayor, on behalf of the committee, needs to approach the council for financing during the entire course of this project?
Well, I mean, first of all, let me just say thank you, Mr. Tallman, for being here. Because, to me, in retrospect, the fact that we did not have a city councilor on the committee from the beginning in the previous process was a problem. I do think we struggled to figure out how to update city council, but I believe, Josh, maybe you want to speak to this. The question is when the mayor is going to bring the budget forward and point for the city council's purposes to how the city is proposing to fund it. That's the question. What is that date?
Well, are there numerous requests that need to take place now? For instance, have we covered the entire schematic design opportunity that the chosen architect will be seeking reimbursement for? Do we have that amount of money available currently?
The money for the architect design?
We have $475,000 that's been appropriated.
That's
That's correct.
Right.
So where does that carry us through, Margaret?
Whitney, I can't answer that because I don't know.
We got to negotiate that price.
We have to negotiate that cost.
And then, so once we get that, then at the end of schematic design, we will have an appraisal of the entire cost of the building, of which will be suitable for the mayor to go before the council and to request financing for the entire project. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, correct. Right. So the purpose of the schematic design process is to develop a design and a cost for that design, which can be the basis of the funding agreement and upon which the city can rely for the duration of the project.
And so the MSBA will bring forth a PFA or a project funding agreement, and then the city will consider whether or not it can afford it. Is that correct?
So, as one of my jobs as the owner's project manager is to develop, based on a format that the MSBA uses, a proposed budget, which is submitted with a schematic design. And as I usually preview with the MSBA before submitting, and obviously with the committee and the city. And then the MSBA, as part of their review, in anticipation of the board vote, they review the budget and they provide comments, and then that document is presented back to the city, and that is what goes to the MSBA board for their approval. So there's a little bit of back and forth that happens in the first couple of weeks after the submission is made.
So I guess I'm not so concerned about the MSBA's approval, but when does the mayor, according to Mount Vernon's group's schedule, when is the mayor required in order to approach and have funding available for the entire project?
Their schedule doesn't seem to suggest that there's any funding approval required at all. I mean, to be honest, it's
got to, because there are 3 different submissions that are occurring to the MSBA. So
no, actually, that's not true. They don't actually have a design in the model school process. There's no design development submission. So you submit schematic design, and then the next submission, I'll just pull this up again so people understand what the heck we're talking about.
I don't understand what we're talking about.
Well, here, the yellow is schematic design, right?
Yeah.
This is the process that sets the cost of the project.
Yes.
At the dotted red line, you submit it, and
The first will be the red.
I'm
right?
sorry?
The first part will be the red. That's the contract negotiation, right? We'll have to go before city council to get, if it's over the 475 that was already.
If it's over the appropriation, yes,
Okay.
there will have to be. So I'm assuming here that that's not going to happen, but I don't know until we have that negotiation, right?
Okay.
So yes, it is possible right here already that there's a moment. but let's assume it's within the appropriation. Mount Vernon does the schematic design, and then they start construction documents, even though the project isn't funded in all likelihood. The MSBA's vote certainly won't be till April 26th. And I'm guessing the mayor's presentation of the budget might be around that time, Mayor Garcia?
May.
Okay, so this is where the city council would vote to appropriate that. So at that point, there's several months into construction documents. And the question is whether they seem to be clear that that's at risk, but that's what they're being specifically asked to address when they come back.
Thank you.
So if the mayor is saying that he probably wouldn't have the information to me, it doesn't seem like the March date with the April votes even possible that we'd have information ready and available anyways. What's the next date after that that would be possible?
That's the date that I had thought we would probably head towards, which is they're literally back to back. There's a board vote, and then the next day is the submission for the next cycle. So
it's either April 27th for June 7th or June 21st for August 30th.
Okay. Exactly. Those are the three. There are additional dates later in the year, but those seem like the ones that are most likely to apply to us.
And then, sorry to be really dense on this, does schematic design need to be done before you, let's say April 27th, would schematic design need to mostly be done because you need to have an estimate of how much the building costs in order to go to city council, right?
So schematic design would need to be done at least a month before that because the estimates take 3 weeks.
Okay, so schematic design has to be done a month before April 27th or June 21st.
That is correct.
So then we're talking March 27th or May 21st. And even in these things, schematic design is showing 3 to 4 months. And we haven't even negotiated anything.
That's right.
So, okay.
Well, what it seems to me that while negotiations of their contract is taking place, they're going to start the schematic design.
Yes, that is their assumption.
At their risk. As well as demolition construction documents.
Yeah.
At their risk.
This part is.
Yes.
And I also want to say schematic design, in my understanding, is going to be a very important time for us because although there's this building that's been built, it's not the correct number of square feet. We haven't made trade-offs about what we want in Holyoke. It's not a time. This isn't the time to cut off a month if you need the time.
Well, as I always say, that estimate, the schematic design estimate, is the one that is the basis of your funding agreement. And if you don't get it right, the MSBA's, it's not the MSBA's problem.
Okay. So we're just entering, I'm sorry, no, I'm not even a voting member, but we're just entering into this really important period where we should act with a sense of urgency, but matched with diligence. And I mean, even the June 27th, we're probably even not going to get voting on this from the MSBA till August 30th if we really start to back this up. I'm going to put this all very well in the notes so people can see this.
Yeah.
But we just need to be aware of that, I think.
Yeah. And Erin, I can send you a snip of this piece of it. We can put a snip of this into the vote. I mean, what's good about this is I can even fold up the space schedule. I think both of these firms will come back now and sort of propose. I mean, you all will have a better understanding and they will have a better understanding because we've asked them to specifically address the funding pieces. Yeah, I think there's more to come.
Good. How are we feeling? No other questions there?
I,
Yes,
So-
Mickey.
yeah, is
Question.
Margaret, are you saying like that diagram basically is implying that the Mount Vernon group would be way faster than everybody else getting to the construction phase, and you think that's just going to equal out in the next round of them coming back? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't think it's going to be equal out. I think that Mount Vernon group is going to take a fundamentally more aggressive approach. I think that is Frank Tedesco's style. And I think it's just important that the committee understand that this process, as Erin just pointed out, is critical to you having a confirmed cost that you can rely on. And so the question that they need to respond to is, what can you tell us? And honestly, they have a great track record on this. I think that the reference checks demonstrated that. They've built this building before. They understand what it costs, right? They feel that they can move very, very fast. And to be honest, with the building, I believe that is true. I think the parts that are harder here are the site work and civil work, which have to really be done from scratch, right?
Okay.
And the question is, speaking on behalf of their consultants, can their consultants move fast enough to have complete documents by the end of January for estimating in February, right? That's the question. Which is why I think it's more likely that we're probably looking at the April 27th submission.
Councilor Tallman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I'm glad, Margaret, you brought that up about the vote and the mayor talking with the council, because when it gets to our committee, the finance committee, it's not like it's going to happen overnight. I'm sure we'll have a couple meetings on that.
Absolutely.
And definitely 2 or 3 meetings. And they seem like Mount Vernon's got a pretty aggressive, and as you said, it seems like there's a big risk there that they're taking. Are they going to do this, the design, the construction documents before we even take a vote? Now the schematic design, is that something they're working on right now?
No, they haven't been hired yet.
Okay, so they won't start until they make the vote in January.
That's right.
So you're already behind could be a month and a half, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to put this out there then. Oh, sorry, Councilor Thomas.
That's all right. I'm good.
Did you still have more points?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
So do we want to go back to the January 5th date? Or are we okay with our January 12th date?
I think the January 12th is still okay. I feel it.
All right. Just as far as time, I just want to make sure that we're moving.
Yeah, I wonder, every week could help, right? Because everything else, at any point, there could be other delays. And so this timeline looks so attractive that if it ends up being at all possible to be on that timeline.
I just want to say, if that works, that's great. If we don't welcome kids into if it finishes October 2025 and kids had to start the school year in a different building and we're bringing them in October 25, that would be okay. That would be okay too. Not ideal, but there's nothing, it's not like totally 2025 or bust.
Agree.
I think that all membership being present is more important, and that no work is happening on the contractor side in the next couple of weeks anyways, or designer side. So who cares? Not who cares, but we're not losing much. It's
all good. It's all good.
Personally, I feel that they've done this 3 times, that the schematic design isn't going to be as long as a traditional schematic design is going to take.
And Mark, as far as the building is concerned, I 100% agree.
Yeah, good point.
It's not. Totally agree.
One step at a time.
But The building systems have to be designed from scratch for all electric. The site has to be redesigned from scratch. And the question is, are there consultants prepared to proceed at risk? They may be prepared to proceed at risk, but you're talking about, 3 or 4 major consultants that have to be kind of in it with them to do that.
Any follow-up thought, questions, comments here?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, Mr. Callamore.
Yeah. Clarify something for me. Are we gonna separate demolition from architectural design?
So, Mr. Collmore, in all likelihood, they will be bid as 2 separate packages, but there is some risk associated with it.
I just don't feel that we should be doing this right away. I think we ought to demolish the school and then start working on the design, because I'm just afraid that after they demolish that field, that school, we're gonna have some land to play with out here that is very vital to us.
Any response to that? We're good?
I think that's kind of the plan, which is good.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Callamore. Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank you for that previous dialogue. I know it's not that easy to discuss these different things, but I just hope that throughout the course of that discussion that we're able to give a clear picture of what that graph means. And I thank you for that time to engage in this dialogue.
Thank you, Whitney. I was trying my best to keep it within 1 hour, but I saw that it was a long shot after the first 5 minutes after. So it's all good. That's what we're here for. Any other follow-up comments, questions, concerns? All right.
Mayor,
So,
but just before we end tonight, I just wanted to say, there's been some negativity in social media lately about some folks in the public schools, and I just want anybody to know that's in the public schools, I see you and you're working hard, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, Mark. It's a vocal minority, but nevertheless, I wholeheartedly agree with you. There's a great deal of support for those that are working hard in the district. And Erin Linville, you're awesome. So,
Erin, are there meeting minutes that the committee needs to take up?
Yeah, the last 2 ones.
yep. So we have review meeting minutes. Well, according to the notes here, Erin, 12-1 is only partially completed, so we're not taking that one up.
Oh, I think actually Margaret completed it, right, Margaret?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we have 2 meeting minutes we need to approve, one from November 17th, the other one December 1st.
Like a motion that we accept these last 2 meetings.
Motion's been made to accept the meeting minutes by Mr.
Second.
Lubel, seconded by Councilor Tallman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It looks like we voted on both of them at the same time there. Where's the Senator Linville sample template for references? That's done. Margaret invite. All right. So our next meeting is going to be on the 12th. We'll be convening at 5:00 p.m.
Well, sorry, do you
Mayor,
want
I think we decided January 5th. Keep the January 5th, try to do an hour so we can hear about the Flansburgh design and reference calls. And then that'll be at 6. And then January 12th will be 5 to 8 p.m. with the interviews.
Okay, got it. All right. So we are going to meet January 5th, but it's not for the interviews. It's to go over the references. Okay.
With the site visit that we're going to do.
And the site visit.
Yeah.
Is that, Is that 6, 5, 6:30? What time are you guys doing that?
I think 6 is fine for the
6.
5th. It will not be a long meeting.
Journey for, and Camelia, I'm sorry we didn't have translation services today. There was a little bit of a communication error. I take full responsibility, but we will have translation services ready, right, Erin, for January 5th, January 12th. It looks like Scott gave you that permission to just communicate directly with them.
That's how I like it.
All right. Other notes, next steps, Margaret's to contact Flynn. All right. I don't think we have anything else unless I'm missing anything.
You did it.
I was just gonna tell you guys, as far as the financial forecasting is concerned, I will be submitting an order under one of the members of the council to receive that and move it to committee. And I'm hoping that finance committee will do will receive that presentation at a January meeting. When that meeting is set and scheduled, I'll let you guys know in case you want to participate and observe that, that presentation. Other than that, I think this is our last meeting of this year. Am I wrong or am I right? I'm right. So have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, and I'll see you all next year.
You too.
Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Holidays. Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.